Hello and welcome to my presentation, Digital Equity in the Modern Age, How Library Users with Physical Disabilities are Impacted by Current Advancements. In the digital age, I wanted to look at how ethics are reframed, and in reviewing reference services and the ethical practices applied to library science, the continual need for evolutionary methods to address underserved populations is duly noted. Underserved populations, particularly persons with disabilities, have historically been affected by reduced access to library services. In my paper, I mainly am discussing patrons who have either vision reduction or loss and how their access to library resources have been hampered, and particularly in this field of reference library services. By reviewing the ethical approach required of reference library services, the recent studies of equity in the digital field, and considering the current legal ruling on this topic handed down by the Department of Justice, my paper demonstrates how libraries are responding to the needs of patrons with disabilities and addressing accessibility concerns in the digital age. To begin with the topic of library reference and these ethical considerations, I'd like to cite the American Library Association's Code of Ethics. To this end, peoples with physical disabilities are greatly impacted by the first guideline that libraries and their staff provide the highest level of service to all library users through appropriate and usefully organized resources, equitable service policies, equitable access, and accurate, unbiased, and courteous responses to all requests. In recent years, there has been a need for equitable access, especially at the forefront of this discussion for disabled patrons, since we now have the invention of the World Wide Web, as well as all the technology that comes with that, and how a lot of accessibility to library resources is all conducted online. As we know, reference librarianship, chat options, email options, all of these new things that have come about in the web age are impacting people just through accessibility. And this shift from emphasis on service to providing unfettered access, along with other changes brought by technology, evolution, and social transformation, requires that reference professionals' collective understanding of ethical issues be reevaluated and reinterpreted. For the purposes of my paper, I consulted multiple studies on this topic. There are two I'd like to highlight in the time frame of this presentation. The first is by Luo, who implemented judgmental sampling with a survey of academic, public, and special librarians who worked in reference. When the topic of disabled patrons was considered, not only are library technology options limited in her results due to their incompatibility, but often so too is reference assistance. The final pronouncement by the author is correct in concluding that ethics in the field of library reference need to be reevaluated as technology expands. The second study, by Ferreira, implemented a study to survey library staff from 13 states and their experience with disabled persons. For the purposes of her study, it was mainly to deal in relation to attitudinal barriers for disabled patrons, but there was feedback in her survey, and it was revealed in addition that participants indicated that services to individuals with disabilities were often limited due to a scarcity of resources, including time, staffing, space, and money. Final conclusion, I'd like to look at the author Faye Zipkowitz and her book, her reference Services for the Underserved. She has a great introduction in this book, and she acknowledges how these perceived problems can become an extensive list when addressing these so-called problem patrons. She notes 2 points, however, must be emphasized. 1, they are individuals with individual as well as collective needs, and 2, our commitment to equitable library service to all of our constituent user groups requires that we find ways to meet these needs. My final aspects that I'd like to draw into this presentation regard the recent rulings on this particular topic. As of April of this year, the Department of Justice noted that digital access for a vast majority of public services have moved online. Often, however, state and local government entities' web and mobile app-based services are not designed or built accessibly, and as a result are not equally available to individuals with disabilities. To compare digital access to physical access as an example, just as stairs can exclude people who use wheelchairs from accessing government buildings, inaccessible web content and mobile apps can exclude people with a range of disabilities from accessing government services. In conclusion, there has been historical underrepresentation for these people who have vision reduction and loss, and this disability has hampered their equitable access to library services and especially reference services in recent times. However, with these recent rulings, there is optimism that this will change in the future. If you would like to consult any of my references from my paper and this presentation, please feel free and take a look. And thank you very much for listening.